Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today. What lovely videos we had. That was surprisingly good. Very nice professional videos. Thank you again, everybody joining us. We had lots of sign-ups. Guys, let us know that you're watching in the comment section. Press one if you're here. Without further ado, let us introduce our amazing guests here. And I'll pass the microphone right away to Ruth. Ruth, please introduce yourself. Tell us why you're here and why we're particularly talking about source of funds today.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me today, Arsalan, and great to be here with Jen and Yasaman. My name is Ruth Mittelman-Cohen, and I'm the head of legal compliance at VinciWorks. VinciWorks provides e-learning compliance training and software to hundreds of law firms in the UK and around the world. And I have the honor of working with our law firm clients. Today, obviously, source of funds, source of wealth is a key topic, comes up every year in kind of SRAs, AML reports, and it's great to be joining the panel today with everyone. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yasaman, I'd love to hear from you next.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yasaman Asad. I'm a partner of real estate finance and head of Middle East desk at Child and Child Law Firm. I'm really happy to be here and joining the webinar.
Sweet. And Jen?
Hi, I'm Jen Dunlop. I'm Managing Director of the Compliance Office, and we're a specialist SRA compliance consultancy. So we advise lawyers and law firms on AML and SRA compliance, SRA authorization, and we undertake independent AML audits as well.
Amazing. So we have a well-rounded points of view here. So we have VinciWorks, been around forever. They've been training law firms and they have a great tool called OmniTrack. Ruth has seen hundreds of law firms, if not thousands. So she knows their processes inside out. Yasmin has practice at the highest level internationally. So is quite familiar with doing source of wealth, source of funds, but doing it in a way that doesn't annoy the client and actually is still hitting those regulatory obligations. And Jennifer advising law firms, auditing their process and telling them how they can improve it. So here we have good points of view, but I guess I'm just going to go around the table and just get a brief overview of why source of funds is important today, and what makes it a high risk area. Jen, would you like to go first? Why do you think source of funds should be looked at today? And yeah, just give us some insights on that.
Yeah, I mean, as we've discussed, it's a really high risk area, and it's an area that historically law firms have been really bad at. So the SRA undertook a thematic review quite recently, and it did not make for good reading. There's ongoing widespread non-compliance still. I think it was about 18% of the files that the SRA reviewed showed really poor scrutiny of source of funds and source of wealth. So it is still one of the most significant areas of non-compliance within the AML framework, and it's potentially a huge risk for law firms if they get it wrong.
Yeah, I'm happy to kind of add to that as well, if that's okay, Arsalan, that I think also we're at a point now, as you mentioned, Jen, that kind of regulators are really testing real behavior at this point and not just having policies in place. And it's really become a key indicator as to whether AML is actually working in practice or not for firms. And I think they're actually being kind of judged on the decisions, challenges and judgments. And it's not just about having these documented procedures in place anymore. It's going the step further. And obviously there's reputational and operational damage for anything that goes wrong around this. So I think that's why kind of source of funds, source of wealth is really, really important. Yasaman, what are your views around that?
I agree with both of you. Yes, source of funds is quite important. As a solicitor, we are regulated by SRA and we are subject to compliance checks and going through the documents for the clients. Specifically in property transactions, we see a lot of and we do a lot of source of funds check, source of wealth check, and I believe the key fact is the difference between source of funds and source of wealth, because we are going through all of this for a client. Not it's just a specific transaction and a specific money. We have to go through the full history of the person, their kind of wealth, and everything else.
Yeah, just and on that for all. So sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go
continue.
ahead.
No, it's okay. Continue.
I was just going to say, when you look at source of wealth and source of funds, what do you kind of establish first? Do you establish the wealth first or the funds? And can you tell us a brief meaning of these for the people who are lacking the nuance?
Uh,
Take
oh,
that.
sorry, Jen, you go first.
Yeah, so in terms of the distinction, source of funds is looking at the origin of the money being used for that specific transaction. So savings in a client bank account, a loan from a bank or another lender. You're interested in whether you can evidence that those specific funds, that specific money was legitimately acquired. When it comes to source of wealth, you're looking at the origin of the client's entire accumulated wealth, so savings, business ownership, inheritance, all those types of wealth profiles. And you're assessing whether that looks reasonable given everything you've learned about the client. So does the picture the client presents in respect of their wealth profile make sense? You would normally start with the source of funds and look at the funds that are coming in for that particular transaction, and then start to look at their overall body of wealth and really do a deep dive into that, particularly if the matter's higher risk. Sorry, Ruth, I don't know whether you had anything to add there.
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty much the same we're seeing kind of from the big firms, that's the way you kind of work from source of funds and then move over to the full wealth profile. And I think the biggest thing is, and I'm sure we'll say this many times during today's webinar, but is to really make sure that everything makes sense. If you've got an 18-year-old that suddenly wants to spend kind of millions of pounds, you need to understand where that money's coming from. And it's really just making sure that you're getting a complete picture, and kind of the source of funds, source of wealth there is a critical piece in that process.
That's correct. Yes. So basically, the procedure is similar as per you, Jen and Ruth explained. We are going through. I mean, for a property transaction, let's say, for example, we are going through the clients to begin with bank statements. There is no kind of limitation on how many years you go back for a bank statements. Like everyone's, sometimes they think clients that is last 3 months or last 6 months is enough. But we are going, back to establish where the, original funds came from and how the wealth was accumulated or, received. For example, we have a lot of clients, they source of funds and source of wealth comes from inheritance, for example, profit of a company, shares that they have purchased long time ago. So that's not, for us as a solicitors, regulated by SRA, it's not really sufficient for a source of funds. We have to go back, for example, that, how that wealth was generated from, that you made you able to purchase those shares in a specific company. And now after, let's say 5-6 years time or a couple of months time, now you are selling the shares with a profit. So yes, we have to go back to establish the, the funds from the beginning.
Yes, man. Can I ask you a question related to that? How
Sure.
annoying do lawyers find the checks and having to gather that information, kind of as someone that deals with it frequently? How annoying is it in practice?
To be honest, it becomes kind of a routine checks for us, okay, or at least for me. You have to be. I mean, client to client is different. The culture to culture is different. You need to, be prepared and explain everything, step by step to every single client, because not everyone knows that, why exactly we are doing that and why we are asking for extra documents, not just the bank statements. So when you explain this to the clients step by step, they understand it and they follow. There is no problem. And we are lucky because in our firm, we have a separate compliance department. When a solicitor completes the checks with the, due diligence, source of funds and everything else, then we will send it to our compliance department and they will recheck everything again. And if there is anything missed or there is anything required, extra information, we can provide that as well. So just to make sure that, everything is in place, basically.
If I could ask a follow-up to all of you, I guess how different is the client when it comes to a conveyancing matter to a high value matter? Presumably the client of a high value matter has done these processes, so is a little bit more familiar with the source of funds process, whereas a first-time house buyer might not be familiar and might be quite insulted by the depth of the questions and the depth that solicitor is digging at. How do you find the differences between the two?
I mean, when we're looking at files for law firms, I think people are much more savvy when it comes to to the questions that law firms and lawyers are going to ask them. People tend to have been through a process before where they've had to provide this type of information. For first-time buyers, law firms are getting a lot better at explaining the process, explaining the documentation that's going to be needed. Happier using the tech that's out there. So there's a lot of onboarding platforms that people can use. I think sometimes when it's very well-established existing clients of a law firm and they feel like they're being asked the same questions over and over again, that's when there can be some pushback. But I think generally, from conveyancing all the way up to big transactions, when we're looking at files, people tend to be quite cooperative and quite happy now to provide that information. It was very different maybe 5-10 years ago when people weren't used to it, but it seems much easier to gather that information now. I mean, Yasmin, you're on the front line of it, so I'm not sure what you see.
No, that's true. Actually, people are getting more and more kind of familiar with the source of funds and documents required. I agree with you. Maybe a couple of years ago, even last year or 2 years ago, it would be a little bit more difficult to deep down into the source of funds and go and ask, extra questions. But this year is getting better because I think it's not just the solicitors and the purchase of a property, even the banks, high street banks now, they are very kind of tight on the source of funds. If the funds comes to for example, any individual accounts and the source is a kind of a red flag for any reason, maybe it's just a name or any reason, sometimes the bank can kind of hold on to the funds or close the accounts and ask the client for extra information. So clients are becoming, I agree with you, Jen, clients are becoming more kind of familiar with this process. Whether first-time buyers or very commercial-minded clients that they are doing this regularly. And also as a solicitors, for us reviewing the source of funds, because for example, one transaction may take 3 months for different reasons. If it's a big transaction, if there are different parties involved, it might take 3 months. What we usually do, we usually review the source of funds in advance just to make sure that we are not wasting anybody's time going to the down to the line of the transaction and all of a sudden say, oh my God, before exchange of contract, we can't accept the funds. So we usually do it in advance, check the source of funds, all the documents. And when we are satisfied that we can accept the funds, then we proceed to the conveyancing and buying doing the due diligence about the property and everything else. However, the due diligence on the source of funds is ongoing as well. It's not just we are checking this in the beginning of the transaction and then we forgot about it until we need the money on account. It's an ongoing process from the beginning, in the middle, and towards the end. So it's kind of, I agree, it's kind of a time consuming as well for us, for clients as well, but it's something it's required to do by regulations. So.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, I think a lot of this is all about communication and making sure that your clients have the right information. Also, it might be a good time to mention that VinciWorks do have a guide on this that might be useful to share. And this is a guide that actually some firms have said to us they've taken our guide and they've provided kind of a one-pager for their clients to explain why it is that they're collecting source of funds and source of wealth information, because that's obviously... as long as the client understands why this precaution is happening, why it's taking place, they feel much more comfortable. I will say that one thing that we've noticed with kind of the larger law firms that we work for is that it used to be potentially that firms would really only dive into detail when they were dealing with transactions that directly related to AML and they weren't really caring for those other transactions. What we're seeing now is that firms are really, as soon as they're onboarding clients, they're making sure they're doing at least some basic checks and having clear record of those checks, especially around source of funds before any transaction. So whereas beforehand they may have kind of picked and chosen kind of which transactions they were doing this for, right now it feels like it's something that definitely we're seeing from the SRA, and Jen, I'm sure you're seeing this as well, that is something that they really care about. And that's obviously transitioning down into the firms also, that they're really making sure that they've got a clear policy around this and they're really gathering the information as required.
Great. Ruth, just a question for you. You guys been building products to actually solve these problems. How are you seeing law firms tackle this internally, and how have you guys tried to tackle this for them?
Yeah, so obviously we're seeing in general that the kind of risks around this are higher when firms kind of need to evidence both the source of funds and source of wealth clearly. So obviously the larger firms are dealing with kind of real estate, corporate M&A, kind of I guess private client work, like we've said. They really consistently kind of are exposed. And I think that firms at this point are realizing they have to understand kind of the origin of the transactions and also how the clients have built the overall wealth, kind of as Jen suggested in the definitions earlier. But I think the challenge that we're finding, and that's where kind of we're trying to get our technology to help with, is that you really need to have a coherent narrative that's documented, and that you need to in essence tell a story. So even if you're collecting a bank statement here or there, the idea is you need to be able to have a full story that should you be audited, you can say that this matches. And if you have source of funds saying one thing and then a different client profile saying something different and there's a mismatch, that's going to be kind of extremely problematic. So the one thing that I think is really important for any firms, especially kind of the firms we're working with, is that each firm has a unique approach. So like, yes, man, I'm sure Child and Child have a certain approach where a different firm would have a different approach. And the idea is to really make sure that whatever approach you're taking in terms of your source of funds, source of wealth, but also your full kind of AML process fits in with whatever the compliance regime is in your firm. So whether you have a separate compliance entity or whether it's actually a smaller firm and maybe it's just a fee earner that's also wearing the hat as a compliance officer as well and doing multiple jobs. And I think the important thing is to realize, and I'm going to say it openly here, is that there's not a kind of one solution that accommodates everybody. And I think that each firm really has to kind of find the right solution to fit their needs, depending on also their risk appetite. And also, yeah, the bottom line is you definitely need to make sure you've got something in place to evidence and document all your decisions. Larger firms we see often have a structured process, but they may struggle with consistency at scale because they've got tens of thousands of clients. And smaller firms maybe rely on judgment, but maybe lack kind of robust documentation. Maybe Jen, I don't know you. I know you work obviously closely with some of kind of the smaller firms. Maybe you want to share your experiences there around kind of how they're dealing with source of funds and source of wealth.
Yeah, I mean, I think smaller firms face exactly the same risks, high risk areas of practice, high risk clients. But I think the resourcing issue is really, really difficult for smaller firms. They often don't have a centralized compliance team. They don't have specific and specialized onboarding support. So it's the individual fee earners that tend to deal with these checks. And they then have quite a lot of discretion in how they approach those checks, which obviously can cause inconsistent application of the policies, which is a huge risk and is something that the SRA is really focusing on at the moment. And I think another issue for smaller firms is that a lot of these checks are still manual, so they don't have those tech solutions that are often utilised very well by the larger firms. So the process is therefore much more time consuming, again, less consistent application. And so again, it's just more inherently risky for those smaller firms. I think, look, ultimately all firms need to take these risks seriously. But I think for smaller firms, the risks are really amplified just by that lack of resource that they have.
Yes, I agree. I think the compliance is something that every single firm, whether small, whether big, whether commercial kind of law firms or high street law firms, they need to take it into account, because it takes only one mistake transactions to vanish the whole law firm basically. But at Child and Child, we have a separate department for compliance, and everything is being carried out and reviewed due diligently.
Great. Just
And I think
that.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think even the smaller firms are really trying to move towards a model where there is some specialized compliance support and a compliance function within the firm, because it is just so important and so high risk if things go wrong. I think that's the direction of travel that we're seeing, certainly.
Yeah, and I guess, Jen, also that services like what you offer are helping those firms as well. So even if someone has been thrown the title of compliance, you and your team are there to kind of help hold their hands should they have queries or need external audits, etc. I think nowadays we're seeing that there are lots of people around that can really support firms to make sure that they're compliant. I think at one point it was kind of people use it as an excuse. We don't have anyone that can take on that role. And I think nowadays there's a very high expectation that people need to be compliant. And we're seeing that also through fines. There were recently fines now for lack of providing information to the SRA that were given in the last 24 hours. So we're seeing here that really compliance can't be ignored anymore.
Yeah,
And
absolutely, Ruth.
just on that, how do you guys feel about, so the process itself requires you to do the activities, but I feel like a lot of it is the practice itself feels like a tick box exercise rather than evaluation of your client. So you're collecting 3-month pay slips, you're getting their open banking, you're sending them a questionnaire, but you're reading the thing. Are you actually reading their slip and noticing, hey, there's a dodgy payment coming from this weird country? What is this payment? Even though it's totally unrelated, you still might, notice that. Do you guys feel that? Do you think the inadequate source of funds checks that are being fined, is it because they're just going through the exercise and not actually evaluating? Or do you feel like actually a lot of firms are picking up that this is an evaluation process and not just a robotic one?
I think kind of year on year, we're seeing that this is being flagged by the SRA as being a problematic area. And I think the challenge for all firms is to make sure you've got kind of a coherent financial narrative around kind of the source of funds. And you're not just collecting documents, as you said. And I think that regulators we're seeing when they're carrying out audits, etc., they're really expecting firms to kind of explain how and why a client has their wealth, and being able to kind of show that it's been documented and clear in the evidence you've received. And I know it sounds like simple, but it's not a simple exercise, and it does involve someone needing to go line by line and making sure they fully understand and kind of that can sit in front of an auditor and explain exactly what the story is of the client. I think that's really important. And again, we're seeing it inconsistencies. The SRA is saying they're seeing inconsistencies appear between source of funds, source of wealth, and the client profile. And I guess being able to flag that is the first step. Being able to have someone that can go in and flag that, as Child and Child have, you've got a full compliance team who are trained and doing that kind of on a daily basis. But I think it's tough, and it's getting harder with AI now as well, with being able to produce fake bank accounts, etc., and kind of getting your tool to produce something. It's definitely not getting easier, and that's why I think having a tool at least to help you is important. But you also need human to be reviewing this and making sure it all makes sense. So as much as technology is great and it's important and it's a massive aid, ultimately, as with any AML kind of compliance requirement, you want to have a human being look through it and make sure that the story makes sense and is coherent.
That's 100% correct. Actually, I agree with you, Ruth, as well. It's not just about collecting documents or how many documents you collect from a client. It is about you reviewing the documents, and if there is any questions, as Arsalan rightly mentioned, if there is any kind of credited, kind of money, even a small money in the account, just ask what is it. Right? For example, we came across sometimes that you ask clients in advance that what is the source of funds? Is it coming from yourself? Is there any gift or something? Sometimes clients say, no, there is no gift. It's all my money. My money, it means the money that I have given to my friends sometimes, and now she's giving it back to me. My money means that the money that I have given to my cousin long time ago, and now my cousin is giving back my money. So when you go through the source, like a bank statement, my money comes from kind of separate individuals. So we need to go back to those individuals to find out who are these individuals, where the money comes from, what was the source of the funds. And in many kind of transaction, I'm not saying the client is not telling the truth. Obviously, you can give money to your friends, family, £1,000, £2,000, £10,000, and they can return it when exactly you need it to buy a property. Exactly. Just before transaction, £10,000 dumb in the client account. But you need to, unfortunately, at that time, because there is no loan agreement or anything like that, to back it up, we need to go through that person's or that friend's or cousin's history of the source of funds, and that sometimes make the transaction a little bit longer, delay the transaction, and sometimes client doesn't like it. But unfortunately, this is something that we need to do.
Yeah, and just another point, I suppose it goes back to the SRA's concern about firms having often quite good policies and procedures, but those not actually being applied on the ground. So you can have a wonderful framework that says, in these cases, we would like to see 6 months worth of bank statements and a copy of the loan agreement, X, Y, and Z. But if there isn't any analysis and a really detailed analysis of those documents, you're almost better not guessing them. It's absolutely pointless getting 6 months worth of bank statements if you're not going to look at those statements, analyze those statements, and really importantly, document your analysis. You need to be able to evidence to the regulator, these are the checks that we did, this is our analysis, and this is why we feel that we are happy to proceed with this transaction. It needs to be easy to understand on the file so that when the auditors do come in, and they will, every firm is going to be audited by the SRA from an AML perspective at some point. You're ready for that. You've got those documents, you've got the explanation. And even if you've missed picking up on an issue on a particular file, you're going to get a lot more ticks in boxes and a lot more brownie points from the SRA if they can see that documented process that you've worked through on every case.
Ruth, do you want to talk about that, documenting your analysis? Because I feel like your tool actually does a good job of making everything in one place, or having it where it is possible to document everything in one area. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, sure. So documentation is important. Again, I apologize, I'm bringing this wider, but it's not just for the source of funds, source of wealth piece, generally for all kind of AML related checks, having documents in one place, being able to easily source them, being able to find them and locate them in one centralized location is critical. Often we see clients coming to us and saying, well, we've got a compliance team, we're putting some of the documents in a case management system, some are being sent to a secretary or to a kind of personnel to just keep in via their email, some we're putting in another, an iManage or a cloud storage place. But if you ask me, we'll be able to find it, but you'll actually need 3 different people to be able to find those documents because they've been sent to different people. They're not centrally located. There's not kind of a one place you can go to. And I think, again, we've said this lots of times, even in this webinar, but the SRA are knocking on firms' doors. If you haven't had an audit, you should be expecting one, and they will give you a file number, a client number, and say, I want to see everything you have on this. And if you're able to have everything located in one place rather than needing 3 different people, what if one person's on holiday and they don't have access to their emails? It's just a nightmare. And really our OmniTrack tool tries to combine everything together. So there's kind of a one-stop shop for all your AML compliance needs. So it's all centrally located. So should you have someone knocking on your door, you can say, hey, here is exactly where everything is. And you can put in a client number and see kind of every document related to that. I think we're seeing in general that firms are getting better at this, and that's larger firms and smaller firms. Used to be that you kind of get a client number and you'd have to go downstairs to a basement and open up a few boxes, wipe the dust off and the cobwebs off to kind of bring out the evidence, probably with copies of passports that were not valid anymore, etc. And I think now with technology, there's lots that can help to make sure that kind of all the documents you have are valid and up to date. So you're not looking at a bank statement from 3 years ago. You're looking at a recent bank statement, should you need to be looking at a more recent bank statement. And I think technology can really help with that. And one of the things that we do kind of at VinciWorks is create kind of these bespoke kind of document collection as part of the workflow to really ensure that based on the transaction type, the correct documents are being collected, and based on different entity types and the different KYC that's required, we can use kind of conditional logic to make sure that the right documents are being collected for whatever the client profile is, whether it's kind of a partnership or an individual, or even to the next stage. If enhanced due diligence is required, we can kind of provide you specific requirements based on what you need, additional information you may need to collect because enhanced due diligence is required, etc. And I think really responsibility around document collection should be shared. I don't think it should just fall on the compliance team. I think that the fee owner, who is obviously actively involved with the client, needs to be involved as well. And I think it needs a partnership. But again, the bottom line through all of this is you need to have one centralized location where all of these are being stored and not have it sitting in someone's inbox. And you need to have it accessible so that should the auditor come knocking, you're able to provide the evidence as needed.
Thank you for
Yeah,
that.
and sorry, just one thing to add to that. I think with the move to the FCA regulating compliance, well, AML compliance, there's going to be a lot more data that needs to be gathered and reported on. And so tech solutions, like Ruth has been describing, they're really going to help firms to be able to report very quickly on, you know, numbers of high-risk clients that they have, numbers of clients based in high-risk jurisdictions. That sort of detailed analysis of matters. Sorry, we've gone a bit off source of funds now. But that sort of detailed analysis of who you're onboarding, the checks that you've undertaken, it's going to be needed even more in the future. So getting those processes in place and the tech in place now is going to be really important for law firms.
If I could just add for Yasemin, I'd love to get your thoughts, but how important is it to having that historic documentation? So when you're meeting the same entity again, or another branch of your firm is meeting them, then they can read that file, become aware, okay, this is their funds, this is what we last advised them on. Okay, they had this little issue, we might need to pick that up. So how are you guys dealing with that at CNC? And talk to me about the processes that you guys have adopted to make this easier for yourselves and your clients.
So basically, we are also the source of funds and any clients of the firm, we are also following the confidentiality as well. So not everyone has access to a specific file, basically. Apart from SRA that has access when they come for auditing to everything, but not everyone in the firm can have access to, you know, whatever documents that particular client is sending to the firm, basically. But if it's like a repeated kind of transactions, is a repeated client, existing clients of the firm, obviously, if we have reviewed the source of wealth already for the client and we establish the source of wealth, what we need to do is just touch base on the new source of funds, basically, because source of funds can change. For example, the source of wealth is the same. However, the source of fund for the previous transaction was, let's say, income of the company. But for the new transaction, it might be something else. It might be a director's loan to the company, that it might be different kind of income of a person to his, you know, one of his limited companies. So again, source of funds, source of wealth is something that is ongoing, basically. And even for one client, as a repeated client, or even in a one transaction, it's kind of ongoing. On an ongoing basis, we are doing that quite a lot. And yes, so it's something that we have to keep it up, you know, kind of live, basically. From the beginning of the transaction to the end, it doesn't really matter if the clients instructed you like 6 months ago. I mean, it's easier, it's quicker, because source of wealth has already been established. It's just a new kind of bank statements, new source of funds for a particular transaction we need to see.
Got you. If I could add, we'll go to source of wealth in a second, and Ruth, I have a few questions for you as well. But I've talked to a few law firms on the top 50 front, and they're actually using source of funds, source of wealth as a service, you know, a legal service. So you have a high net worth individual from Hong Kong, 25 years old, has hundreds of millions, right? Wants to open a UK bank account, cannot explain to a UK bank account how I have hundreds of millions. So could have been crypto, could have been a streamer, a gamer, something new, right? But here in UK, in the West, we can't just accept a multi-millionaire from Hong Kong. So what I'm seeing is a lot of law firms actually using source of wealth, source of funds as a service to help these high net worth individuals open up bank accounts, get their files in order, have one centralized, as you would say, a wallet that the lawyer works out on their behalf. And have you heard much on this front, the panel? Have you heard of firms doing this and actually using source of funds as a legal services?
I can't think of a specific case, but I'm sure without a doubt that definitely exists, especially kind of now we're in a global economy, people are traveling and kind of we're in international environments. So it used to be the kind of to move somewhere was a big hassle. Nowadays, people can get on an airplane and just move to a new location, and obviously they need to prove who they are and kind of what their source of wealth is, etc. And I think kind of what a key message I'm seeing also from what Yasemin was saying as well is the ongoing piece is really, really important. It's not just a once and done exercise. And that would apply kind of also in your case. It's just because today there's a certain reason why or certain source of funds. In a year's time, that same client, the source of funds might be different. you have to understand kind of the ongoing developments here. And I think also just one other piece to mention on the previous point is also kind of not falling into the box of making sure everything is standardized. Like if we think about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, that wasn't around, I don't know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And so you really have to make sure that any documentation you're collecting around this is really driven by the risk and the current risk that exists, rather than just a standardized policy that you have in place. And I think kind of the responsibility around this should fall obviously on the compliance team where there is one, but it's also on kind of the individual fee owners as well to make sure that they're keeping up to date with kind of the changes that are going on. And just really, it shouldn't just be, okay, I'm just going to do whatever compliance says, because ultimately the fee owner needs to also understand kind of the full stories there. But in terms of kind of the source of wealth, source of funds, kind of as a new income model for firms, that wouldn't surprise me at all that's existing today. Jen, I don't know what you see.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen that yet, but I'm sure it's happening. I think that you do have to be very careful about relying on source of funds and source of wealth checks that have been undertaken by other practices. You ultimately need to satisfy yourself as the fee earner and the person with conduct of that particular matter that you're satisfied that the wealth is legitimately acquired, that the funds that are coming into the transaction are legitimate, and you don't have any red flags there. And in terms of, as Ruth was saying, the level that you go to and the documents that you obtain for any particular client, it's really hard to standardize because, and I hate saying this, but it depends. It depends on the risk profile of the client. It depends on the particular transaction. There might be funds coming in from a third party that could really complicate matters. So you have to be quite flexible when you're looking at source of funds and source of wealth and making those inquiries, and be prepared to just keep digging, keep asking questions until you feel that you would be in a position to justify your decision to the regulator if they came knocking.
Just to add to Jen's comments, at the moment, for example, if I do a review of the source of funds, it needs to be a related transaction. At the moment, we don't do just a review of the source of funds. If the client wants in the future buy a property, maybe go to the different firm, and then we provide the satisfaction of the source of funds. We do check the source of funds if there is a related transaction with our firm.
And just on that, I noticed
that's what we're saying.
Jen, you talked about PCP being there sometimes, but not being implemented. And then we're talking about scenarios here where if you have this scenario, Ruth, you're saying we shouldn't just follow a standard procedure. We should be tailoring every procedure and trying to understand the client. So should the firm-wide risk assessment or their policies and procedures, should that dictate scenarios, or should it give you some sort of an overview of what you should do if client comes from high-risk jurisdiction, has this kind of high-risk flags? Basically, should your firm-wide give you a map of what to do, or should it kind of be bullet points of here's what you should do, but ask your compliance manager or think for yourself?
Do you want me to start here? Because we look at lots and lots of these documents when we're auditing firms. So your firm-wide risk assessment needs to detail the risk profile of the firm. We're not looking at specific clients here. We're looking at patterns of clients that you deal with, jurisdictions that you become involved with. That will then be used to drive the checks and the inquiries that you make when you're looking at your client and matter risk assessment documents. So the client and matter risk assessment documents are really key when you're then going to start looking at source of funds and wealth. They will identify which clients are potentially low risk or high risk, and enhanced due diligence is needed. When we're looking at good quality client and matter risk assessments, a lot of those will have different scenarios and the documents that you would expect a fee earner or a compliance officer to obtain. But there has to be that element of discretion as well. So it will say, as a minimum, we would expect you to obtain 6 months worth of bank statements and a copy of a mortgage deed, for example. But you also need to then think about, is money coming in from a third party? Are there any unusual transactions on those bank statements? Is there anything else in this picture that makes you worried and makes you think that you might need to get some further information? So it's a bit of a yes, you can have quite standardized documents of the starting point when it comes to source of funds and wealth, but there always has to be those further inquiries that really do depend on the information that you gather. Sorry, I've just said it depends again. I hate saying that, but it really does in this case.
Cool. Ruth and Yasman, do you want to add on to that, the firm-wide and the PCPs? Sorry, Jen, if you had to add on.
No, I was just going to say I'd be interested to see how Yasman approaches it from child and child.
Yes, we do follow the regulations as well, and also for a kind of as Arsalan asked, what we should follow up. Is just a generic kind of procedure that the firm is going to dictate, or there is any other kind of procedures. Basically, it's very simple. The Law Society has got a list of the countries that they are on high risk. You need to be familiar with that list of the countries. Obviously, the transaction or a clients or a source of funds that comes from those lists of the countries, enhanced due diligence needs to be carried out. So whatever due diligence that you are doing in a day-to-day basis on a standard clients, on a clients coming or a source of funds coming from the restricted or high risk countries, it's enhanced due diligence is a lot more basically. But yes, we do follow the list on the HM Treasury for a restricted countries or a sanctioned countries, sanctioned individuals, sanctioned companies, sanctioned businesses, plus Law Society's list of the high risk countries as well, and internal kind of procedure that we follow as well at Child and Child.
Yeah, just to add to that as well, I think that's really where technology can help you out as well when it comes to kind of those checks, the sanctions list, the PEPs list, etc., adverse media. And I think that's where nowadays there's a wealth of different providers out there that can kind of help you to carry out those checks. And you need to make sure that kind of whatever tech you're taking on as a firm, these can kind of adapt to the different providers. For example, OmniTrack actually integrates with a wide range of different kind of third-party providers and kind of have an open API. So if there's a different provider that we're not already integrated with, you can integrate with them, because what we're seeing also is there's kind of trends that are happening that this year all the firms are using a certain provider. Next year they'll be using a different provider. You need to make sure you've got a very agile technology, not only to accommodate kind of the changing regulations, which we know are happening, as Jen mentioned before, kind of the FCA regulations as opposed to SRA as we move forward with AML, but also just be able to understand that usually with tech also it kind of goes in waves, and what today is kind of seen as the best tracker or best PEPs and sanctions checker next year will be someone else. And you really need to make sure that whatever solution you're getting in place kind of from a technology side, that they can really kind of accommodate that as well. And that applies also with kind of your source of wealth, source of fund checks, kind of the open banking, digital ID tools that you're using. These are going to be improving day by day, and we're going to kind of see that. And just it's really important to make sure that whatever tech your firm is using, it can really adapt to these changes as well. Because now with the introduction of AI, etc., things are just moving at crazy speeds, and you need to make sure that you're keeping up as a firm also.
Ruth, you mentioned AI. Sorry, Yasmin, she mentioned
No,
AI.
I was just confirming that whatever Ruth has just mentioned.
Great. I just wanted to get
also, and I had to mention AI. We can't have a webinar for an hour and not mention AI today. It's
I'm curious what you all think of AI and source of funds, because I've seen some tools that have a conditional AI that will ask you questions until it's satisfied. So it'll ask you about your source of wealth, source of funds. It'll have a kind of a criteria list in the back end that is kind of judging you against, and it'll ask you enough questions until it's satisfied that it has done the lawyer's job. So it cuts on the back and forth of a questionnaire. How do you feel about AI and these agents that might be coming in the next few years that will do the job for you? It's not a matter of might. They will do the job for you. So how does that work?
I'm happy to just make a start here around that. I'm also the data protection officer at VinciWorks. So the one piece I would begin with is just to say, be very, very careful what information you're putting into the AI. And that's kind of from a law firm perspective, and also kind of as an individual, whatever you're using as your kind of AI tools on a day-to-day basis, just make sure you're extremely vigilant and that you understand where your data is going and kind of what learning model it's going into and what personal data you're exposing there. So that's just me with like a red flag, just to say, be careful with all data. AI can be a massive help. I think we can all see day by day, I think law firms now, I saw some firms for their trainees are requiring them to do an hour a day using AI billable instead of doing a billable hour. They're saying just spend an hour doing anything related to AI. But I will say, even today, with all the advancements we've made, you definitely still need to have that human touch. So you can use AI potentially to help you to get things through, but I would not feel confident, and I'm sure most law firms will not feel confident just relying solely on an AI tool for making any decisions around this, etc. So my view is AI can be great, but it's got its limitations, and you need to have that human interaction as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's, we've all seen the cases that have hit the headlines of AI hallucinations, and there's been a huge American law firm just this week who they had some AI hallucinations.
I think we might have lost Jen there. Oh yeah, she's back.
Oh,
Sorry, Jen.
am I back? Sorry.
Yeah.
So I think, as Ruth said, that human touch, that point of contact from somebody reviewing the output that's come from the AI product and making sure that you're satisfied with it is always going to be important, actually. And the SRA's made it very clear that, yes, the use of AI is brilliant and encouraged, but you ultimately have that overall responsibility as the fee earning lawyer, and you need to make sure that you're happy with the output before that goes anywhere, whether it's on your file as evidence of source of funds and wealth, or whether it's out to a client in the way of advice or pleadings. Yasmin, how do you use AI?
I agree. I mean, there are going to be a lot of software. I mean, there are a lot of software at the moment, and in the future, is going to be a lot more kind of advanced software that they can help kind of law firms, solicitors, kind of even compliance and everything else. But as you said, I think that the touch of human is still required. Even we are using a software for anything like internally in the law firm, we still need to check it properly after that. You can't just rely on the result that that software as AI producing for for a document. We still need to check it, because maybe it's just the beginning of the coming AI into the legal kind of industry. Maybe, I don't know, next I don't want to say like 5 years, 10 years, or maybe a lot sooner than that, AI is going to be a lot more advanced. And I'm still not sure if AI is going to replace the legal jobs like solicitors or judges. I'm not sure about that, to be honest. I may not be a right person to answer this question, but I think AI is going to help a lot.
Ruth, what do you think in terms of your own product, the future of it? How will AI look like for you guys?
Yeah, I think at the moment we're still seeing quite a lot of caution in the AML client onboarding tool to incorporate too much AI. We've even had from law firms I'm talking about, we've even had kind of the opposite requests of being like, I want to toggle on and off for anything that could be AI so that I can make sure I'm not relying on AI, because I think generally law firms tend to be slightly slower than there are other industries when it comes to kind of emerging technology. Having said that, kind of from the e-learning side of our business, we have kind of conversational learning courses. So take bribery, where you're in essence speaking to a chatbot in essence in order to be carrying out your trading, and that can take kind of 10 minutes, and you're just having a conversation like you would with kind of a chat GPT kind of software. And kind of as a business, we see AI as the future, because honestly, like if you're not using AI, you're already behind today. So 100% we are dabbling and delving into lots of different AI tools. We have at the moment, even we have a law firm that's actually doing a comparison between our AI e-learning courses and regular kind of e-learning courses, and seeing kind of which has the best feedback and which has the best kind of knowledge retention around that as well. So we 100% are going full steam ahead kind of on the AI front, and we're seeing really excellent results from it. But having said that, we are aware that there is a sense of caution around law firms and using AI, and in my opinion, that's rightly so. Obviously, people are nervous, as they should be, about kind of bias related to kind of using AI tools. And I think, as we've all said here, and Yasaman also mentioned, the most important thing is, even if you are using these tools, to make sure there's that human touch to it as well.
Yeah, I think the key here is you can't avoid reviewing yourself. Like you can skip the task, but you can't avoid the end obligation. It's your job as a lawyer to review everything here. I just want to urge people to leave comments and questions in the chat. Um, and I just wanted to let everybody know that VinciWorks, you can download their guide to building a compliant AI program. Links in the below. We have a lead, one of our associates here, who's commented that. But we have some fire questions to ask away as well. Um, One was open banking and forces actual the opposite route, which is collection of document manually. Just a quick fire round. Is open banking doing what it's supposed to? I speak with law firms. They say we pay £10, £15 for open banking, but all it does is grab 3 screenshots. We could have done that ourselves, asking the client, and we wouldn't have to charge them 15, £20. So yeah, I'm not too sure about open banking. Where does everybody here sit on that front?
I'm happy to start. We have a real mix of approaches in the law firms that we work with. Some use the tech solutions that will utilize open banking. Others are still, I call it old school, but you're obtaining the same information. Some will still go out to clients and say, we want copies of bank statements. We want, copies of the documents direct from the client. I think both mechanisms work, both ways work, but open banking is, I think, quicker, neater. It's certainly easier for the client, even if the law firm's getting the same amount of information and documents that they could have asked for themselves. I think the client journey there is much more smooth and streamlined if tech that utilizes open banking is used by the law firm.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that, and especially kind of in transactions where you want to get through them quickly, like conveyancing, etc. You're seeing quite often that the firms are relying on that. Yeah. I mean, I always hear every time I speak to firms that they always say to me, regardless of what technology we're using, we always have kind of the 70, 75-year-old that will insist on coming to our office and giving me everything manually and saying, don't check my name against anything. I will give you whatever you need. I will bring my passport into you and show it to you. So I think it's important for us just to mention as well that there is kind of a certain generation that's still a little bit more hesitant to be using these tech, and there are clients as well. So you need to make sure that we're considering for them also.
No, I agree because even a very, very good example, the Law Society, the SRA has introduced a new protocol form for people who are selling the properties, and this new protocol form, it's not like in the past that you could have actually have it printed and send it to the client, because it asks you different questions, and depending on your answer, it either brings more questions or it directly to the next question. So for some of the elderly clients, it's a bit difficult because they need to log into the computer and fill the form. We can't send it by like a scan copy to them by email or by post, because it depends on their answer to any of these questions. It might be a next question, or it might be actually producing a couple of more questions. So still, I think, yes, a human touch on AI is quite necessary until it is implemented properly for everyone.
Great. And guys, again, ask questions. We have 4 experts here, 3 experts, half an expert here. But we'll answer them. So again, you're a lot of you saying again, it's not just about the process that you do. Every process is fine. It's about the depth you go to. Say for Yasemin, you might have a buyer who might have gifts from not a high risk jurisdiction. Let's say a gift from a medium risk country. Would you still do EIDV? How far do you go to verify the gifters? And what is the gifter verification process for you?
There is no kind of a limit how far you go. Okay, we don't have any limit. We don't have 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, or something like that. It depends on individual and case by case. Okay, sometimes we need to go back for 20 years because we need to establish the source of wealth. Okay, that's the kind of how can I say, that's the kind of source. Basically, we need to establish it first, and then it comes to the whatever figure it is as a source of funds that that person is gifting or loaning to our client, for example, to buy a property. So the answer is there is no limit. We need to dig down, to find out and establish the source of wealth.
And just on that, if you don't mind me, is the verification itself, is that a set procedure again, or would a notary suffice? So I go to my notary in my own country, get a lawyer to sign, say Arslan is a real person. Would that suffice? Or would you want an EIDV biometric full arm of law? Because certain countries, notary is just £100 away from a dodgy lawyer. So what is kind of the protocol there?
Different countries, again, the law society, I think if I'm not making a mistake, I think the law society, they have different type of, or HMRC actually, I'm sorry, not HMRC, HM Revenue. I think they do, HM Treasury, they do have a list of different kind of law firms on any specific countries. And it's always is more than one or two or three. There are a lot of different kind of legal entities, established legal entities, that you can actually direct the client on that country to go to these kind of law firms to certify their IDs or the documents or whatever. Like sometimes signatures on the documents to be needs to be witnessed as well. They need to go to those law firms basically. So we can verify that legal entity, an individual solicitor or a lawyer or a notary on that country, to make sure that that person saw in person our client or our gifters or whoever, and they verify their IDs manually and everything else, and it's a real person.
I think in an ideal world, you would have all your clients going through an electronic ID verification process, because you would then have, particularly when it comes to sanctions checks, you would have that ongoing monitoring of sanctions risk. Whereas if you manually onboard a client, the onus is on you then to do those regular sanctions checks to make sure that at any point in the transaction, your client doesn't suddenly become sanctioned, end up on the sanctions list, and you're inadvertently breaching sanctions legislation. So the electronic verification just makes everyone's lives easier from an ongoing monitoring perspective. I would say if you're getting a law firm in a different jurisdiction to verify a client's ID, make sure that you have checked that law firm. As Yasmin said, make sure that that law firm is properly regulated on that particular jurisdiction's version of the SRA or the Law Society website. And you just have to be as satisfied as you possibly can be that that is a genuine lawyer, genuine law firm, and documents that you can rely on when you're then looking at onboarding or verifying ID of a third party.
Ruth, any thoughts, comments there?
No, I think I agree with everything that's been said. Don't really have anything to add. I think that's spot on. Yeah, in an ideal world, we'll be there. I think we've still got a bit of a way to go.
Cool. Awesome. We just got a quick question. For high net worth individuals or large companies, is using the individual profile or company profile available online a good way to understand source of wealth? So doing a Wikipedia check.
I don't mind starting. So it's a good starting point, but you need to be able to independently verify the information that you're given. So unless it's somebody very, very well known, so David Beckham walks into your office, you are entitled to take a different approach because of how well known that individual is, how well his wealth is understood. For most high net worth individuals and large companies, you are still going to want to really drill down into the funds that are available in their wealth profile, not just rely on documents that are out there on the internet. Not sure if anyone else has any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think also there are so many tools around now that can kind of help you do this as well, that can also go deeper looking through the internet as well, and also obviously get the various documents and kind of requirements that you need. But I think the SRA would not be happy if you just stopped there and didn't do anything a little bit further, scrutinize it a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
We had a follow-up. Additionally, re-gifters, there's some interesting cultural nuances where there could be a collective pot retrievable by one individual at a certain time. Is it reasonable to source of wealth and fund and ID those individuals contributing?
Again, I don't mind starting. You need to, and it may seem a bit over the top, but ultimately you are required to understand the money that's coming into that particular transaction. And even when it's been invested in a single pot by multiple individuals, you should be looking at each of those individuals and making sure that you're happy with the funds coming in. Now, you may take a view that these are all close family members, you're happy with the pitch that you're being presented, it's otherwise relatively low risk, and then the level of inquiries that you make would be would reflect the risk that you've given that particular client. But the answer is yes, you are still going to have to do ID checks on the individuals and source of funds and wealth inquiries, again, depending on the risk profile.
Cool. Just out of interest for time, we'll just do closing statements from everybody on what your key takeaway and tips are for law firms and legal professionals dealing with source of wealth and source of funds.
Shall I go
I
first
can
again?
jump in. Yeah, go on, Jen, you go.
I think my key takeaway really is document everything. Gather documents, make sure you analyze those documents and record your analysis. Really, for me, the key failures in source of funds and source of wealth inquiries are that documents are on file, but there's no analysis, interpretation, and record of what's been looked at and the conclusion that's been reached.
Yeah, I'm happy to add to that as well, that I think it's at one point kind of source of funds, source of wealth was kind of a compliance exercise. I think it now goes kind of a step further, and the firms that get this right really have, as you said, kind of clear evidence, and you've got a real story around the client, and it's not just kind of a bank statement that you're holding up. And I think consistency kind of is the challenge and the opportunity here. So to make sure you've got the right processes and tools, but that they're flexible enough to accommodate changing times and kind of changing client profiles. And yeah, really, where you can, firms should be embedding source of funds and source of wealth into the life cycle of the matter, which Yaseman's kind of mentioned that child and child are already doing. And you really want to make sure there's a continued conversation and that you're able to keep everything up to date and relevant should you ever be audited.
Ruth's comments, it's a source of funds is not just collecting the document, it is collecting the documents and review the same, and is ongoing matter through the transaction.
Sorry, Yasemin, you were kind of muted in the first few seconds. I thought I unmuted you throughout it, but would you mind repeating that?
I just said I agree with Jen and Ruth about their comments as well in relation to ongoing matters, ongoing review of the source of funds. Not just about the source of funds is not just about collecting a bunch of documents. It has to be related documents, and you need to review the same documents and make comments, have some kind of a summary of the documents, and just process it for a whole transaction.
Great, thank you. And I just wanted to say as well, from my side, which is do due diligence on the tools that you're using and make sure that you're not investing in a single point solution that is not really serving you that well, even in the category that it's serving you. So try to look for tools that I would say have the API points that work with the other partners in the ecosystem, because if you're using a KYC tool like Credus and Thirdford, then you definitely need something that complements the rest of the journey with the risk assessment, with the source of funds, and documenting all of that, because those platforms might not have the risk assessment or the documentation tabs. And the way you do that is, luckily, there's a guy named Arslan, and he advises on what tools to review for which industries. And we're creating a platform for buyers and investors where they can map out the market, fill in their criteria. A law firm could come in, map out their entire onboarding journey, get a diagram of what it looks like end to end, and then they could get a recommendation that's saying, hey, this tool can actually do the job of these 3 tools that you're paying 20K each annually to serve you with. So I think do due diligence, and obviously make sure you always listen to experts in the market and stay up to date. So thank you all. Really grateful that you contributed to this. And yeah, I wish you guys a great day, and thank you again.
Thanks for having us, Aslan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.